Please welcome to the stage Larry Quinlan, Chief Information Officer, Deloitte, Guillermo Diaz, Senior Vice President, Customer Transformation, Cisco, Lily Ganges, Chief Technology and Community Officer, Kapoor Center, and moderator, Jessica Ross, Senior Vice President, Finance, Office of Transformation, Salesforce.
Good morning. How are we feeling? I must say, the view from right here, where we're sitting, is absolutely breathtaking. This is a beautiful, amazing crowd. I am so excited this morning to be here with this amazing, inspiring panel of tech leaders to talk to us about careers, give us insights. So why don't we just go ahead and kick it off and start by talking a little bit about what sparked your interest in technology and what initially inspired you to pursue a career or your first role in the industry. And Guillermo, we're going to start with you.
Sure.
But first, I understand sometimes people call you G versus Guillermo. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Okay, so we're all diverse here, right? So we'll be open, and you know, a lot of times people would say Guillermo, Geronimo, Gorillamo, and I was like, okay, if you can't say Guillermo, then just call me G, okay? So.
Well, I think I'm good with Guillermo.
But you've
I'm good
done.
with Guillermo.
You're good.
I'm good. All right.
Yeah. So what inspired me to get into tech was actually my mom. You know, we didn't have a lot of money to go to university, so one of the things that we decided I was going to go to the military, because one thing I did know, I was going to get my degree, because nobody in my family had it, so I was going to do that. And then, you know, she had the blessing of working in communications as a communications specialist for the Army in Pueblo, Colorado, where I'm from. And but I had a view that I wanted to be a Top Gun. I wanted to be like this fighter pilot in, you know, the Air Force or, you know, whatever. And I was choosing between the Air Force and the Navy. I had one problem. Actually, I had two. I couldn't be a fighter pilot because, first of all, you need a degree. And second of all, my glasses were about this thick, right? So that was sort of like off. So then there was, well, you could be a jet engine mechanic. And then the Navy said you could be a communications specialist, electronics. So I told my mom, well, you know, I think I want to do the Air Force because I want to be in jets. She's like, well, what did the Navy say? Well, something about communications and electronics. She goes, that's what you're going to do. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go. I want to, maybe hopefully one day my glasses won't be pop bottle and I can go do that. She's like, you're going to go to the Navy. After fighting about, you know, for a little while, she said, over my dead body, are you going to the Air Force? And so you lose that battle right away, right? So I went to the Navy and I learned about electronics, communications, and this thing called networking. So fast forward, I'm at Cisco, the home of networks. Awesome. So that's what sort of inspired me.
Yeah, we got to listen to Mom.
Always listen to your mom.
Always listen to Mom. Lily, why don't you share us a little bit about your journey?
Starts with my mama, too. What a theme. Actually, I immigrated from Bolivia when I was about 6.5 years old and grew up in Southern California. And so all the different statistics that we all hear of single parent, low income, English as a second language, all these different things that I didn't know were the statistics that were ranked against me, right? Fast forward, I ended up going into electrical engineering, USC, and then eventually my first job was in the aerospace industry, working on massive systems that I think were, a lot of it was classified information. And so for somebody to go back and tell the 6-year-old that this is what you were going to work on, that somebody who wasn't even from the US could be handling some of sensitive information, be in these classified environments, be working on things that could potentially be impacting our lives at a global scale, I wouldn't have believed it. But my mama did, and so I think it's very important especially for immigrant families. I think my mom had no choice but to survive, and I think I took on that pressure, but I think I actually took it on in a positive manner because I was such a nerd. How many of you here love math? Yes! Math was my language. I didn't know English. I couldn't play with the kids in second grade. So I just loved math, and we would just communicate with puzzles and things like that. And I was very fortunate that I had teachers who really fostered that love and that curiosity, and eventually helped me get into magnet programs in LA. And I don't know how many are maybe familiar with LAUSD, but there was a lot of negativity about the educational system in itself. So there's a lot of systemic gaps that we're all aware of. But when there's a will, there's a way, but there's also a need for having mentors and supporters, and that really made the difference for me. Fast forward, I had actually somebody in high school when I was studying, somebody that came to talk about engineering, somebody that looked like me, a Latina. And I was like, what is she talking about? And then they gave us these books. And I'm like, okay, let me look through it. And I just went through each of those types of different engineering. And I was like, nope, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And I ended up with electronics, because I'm like, okay, I love music, we have a radio, I always wondered how it would play. Little did I know what I was getting myself into when I went to USC to study electrical engineering. And I'm sitting next to students whose parents have been engineers for years. They were the ones working at these big companies, and here I am learning about resistors. But all that to say that I think being able to say my motivation for all of this, and because we're in a group of, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so folks are really here passionate about why technology and how technology can be used for good. It really starts with yourself and believing in yourself. Don't doubt yourself. And it also is very helpful to have a mother who, no matter what, she was like, you're not quitting.
Yeah.
You're going to finish.
And it helps when you can see it sometimes. So I think like you having the ability to see a woman that looked like you in the field, like that representation matters. All right, Larry, tell us a little.
So I'm Larry Quinlan, and I'm privileged to serve in the role of Global Chief Information Officer for Deloitte. Last year I was speaking to one of our partner groups in Chicago, and I was reflecting on this, and I attempted to entitle the presentation. I found that it couldn't fit on the slide, but how does a skinny black kid from an island of 35,000 people become the global CIO of the world's largest professional services firm? That was all right. So I started reflecting on how that happens, because that was not supposed to be my path. They say you got to make plans, and I did, and I was going to follow my father into a small business that he had, and that was all set up, and I got really interested in technology in graduate school, and I actually took 6 months more in graduate school, much to the dismay of my family. Your goal is you got to get into school, get out as fast as possible, and make some money, because we've invested a lot in you. And then after school, as I was graduating, I got a job in sales. To be more specific, I was going to sell paper. And I was shocked at how much money you could make selling paper. But as the days wore on, I realized that this wasn't my calling. And I called the placement office in school, and I said, I'm sorry, I know I accepted the job. I may have thrown my family under the bus a little bit, like my family pressured me into taking the job. But I really don't think I can do this. And of course, when that happens, they slam the phone down, and they're not really going to help you again. So I actually pounded the pavement in New York and New Jersey for about 6 months. I sent out hundreds of resumes. I ended up taking what I thought was a dream job at about exactly half the salary that I would have made had I taken the job selling paper. And I learned a few things along the way. I learned that you actually have to have passion for what you do, and I had a passion for technology and what it could do. You really got to have that passion to wake up every morning to do the best that you possibly can. And then I also learned having people help you along the way is really, really, really cool. But that's how I got into technology.
That's awesome. I think we've heard, right? Your mothers, I think the mother is kind of a consistent thing here. Having people that help you along the way and just really believing in yourself. I think self-inspiration is such a big part of this. So Lily and Larry, Kapoor and Deloitte, two amazing firms, companies that have the ability to kind of see across industries. Can you tell us a little bit about the trends you're seeing in the diversity space? Where are you seeing progress, and where is there more attention or change really needed?
That's a great question. The fact that we're here, I think, says something. But I don't know how many of you have read the TechCrunch's article that came out by Megan Rose Dickey. Raise your hand if you have. All right. If you haven't, definitely check it out. It actually compares what's been happening in this space, not only the last 10 years, but the last 5 years, and where we're at today. And so from 2014 to when Google first opened up their numbers to where they're at, the numbers haven't changed. And let's just be real. I think this is where we need to get into the real talk and be able to have it and be able to have these discussions, so then that way we can move towards the solutions. And so in the past 5 years, there's been about different companies that have invested so much money. In 2016, the Caper Center did a study called Tech Levers that showed that the turnover is about $16 billion in cost. Imagine if we were to take some of those funding and put it into applying in helping the folks not just get into these jobs, but stay in these jobs. And so I think being able to have the discussion how big the problem is, how costly it is, who is it impacting is step one. I think there's been a lot of steps forward, a lot of steps backwards, a lot of steps sideways, a lot of dancing around. But I'm really inspired by the employees at these tech companies. I think the trends that we're starting to see is really the power, the collective power of individuals coming together. I think employee resource groups are some of the most overlooked, underutilized by some companies, but not by all. The ones that understand the power, the ones that invest in this talent are the ones that are going to be able to retain the talent, but also create a culture that is not just things that you read on headlines, but is really meaningful and impactful. To your point earlier, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to be passionate about it. And you want your company to invest in you, and you need them to show you that they can do that. And so how can we turn those $16 billion of loss into opportunities? Mm-hmm. That's one of the questions that we should be having. I think other discussions that are important, as you sit in these seats, I can relate to you. I actually left engineering. I left this amazing job that my mom till this day, she's like, I don't know what you did. You got into debt to go to grad school, and I don't know what you're doing now. But I actually left because I was working on things that I didn't think, I wanted to use technology for good. I didn't think that they were actually gap closing. It felt like they were actually gap widening. And I wanted to use my talent and skills to be able to do something different. Mm-hmm. But having that sense of ownership and power as an employee that I myself can find a new opportunity, and I decide with my feet and I decide with my talent. And so I think that's one of the big trends that we're starting to see is that as the individual employees are starting to organize, are being more vocal, are being able to actually create different asks, and the companies are listening, I think that's a step forward. Specifically on the going further on the transit, the Caper Center, we have the venture capital arm called Caper Capital. So we're actually very bullish on having some of these types of systemic issues be really tackled from the beginning. If your company doesn't believe in the DEI from the beginning, and you wait till you're 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, you have to be creating a whole new company. Let's just be real. But when you are being the person who's starting your company from day one, when you look at how you're building your team from 5 people to 10 to 100 to 500, I think that's when we're going to start to see some of not just the talent being brought to the table in a different way and solving meteor problems, but the data shows that these companies actually provide bigger returns. So Caper Capital published their report that shows that all of their companies, you don't have to lose the impact to also even make profit. Mm-hmm. They were able to show that their investments over the last 8 years are competitive at the top quartile of all the VC firms in the Valley. And so for me, it's those trends going into what are the new companies going to be, and how are we going to redefine what impact, what value it is. And it really starts with everybody sitting right here. Your voice in that front seat, it matters, and you should definitely be empowered to use it.
Absolutely. Larry, what are you all seeing at Deloitte?
I think there are a number of trends that we look at. We look at the whole notion of inclusion and how people want to feel respected, included. People want to believe that this is a place that they can be heard. Everyone wants to work in a place for a person where we can bring ourselves to work. But there are a number of trends that affect us negatively as well that we continue to look at. In some cases, it's the absence of intentionality, the notion that perhaps stuff will just rise to the top, and that doesn't quite work out the way it is, and just making sure that we understand what we've got to do to create a really inclusive environment. I remember standing on stage and talking about the need for intentionality, and we'll say sometimes, sometimes the things we say get wrapped up in a whole lot of niceties. So, how's this for an inclusion speech? We're actually going to hire more black people. Right? And we just don't have enough women in technology. And we're going to fix that. Oh, and by the way, I know that kind of talk makes some of us uncomfortable because you believe it's a zero-sum game, and I don't actually think it's a zero-sum game. So here's how you can actually create an inclusive environment where everybody feels welcome, while at the same time understanding, in case you forgot, we're going to hire more Latinos, and we're going to have more women. And having those intentional conversations about what they call the commander's intent, but doing so in a way that people understand that we're at the same time going to build an inclusive environment for all people. That's a trend we're seeing that actually could work, that has promise, where people are actually willing to step out and say, these are the kinds of things we absolutely intend to do in our organization, as opposed to thinking that it's going to happen by osmosis.
Yeah, no, I think, and we have a lot of conversations on my team about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I think as we're heading into the fourth industrial revolution, that is a skill that we all need to embrace. And I think these conversations are uncomfortable, but we need to really be intentional about getting to the comfortable side of that. So on that note, I feel like we talked about the technology industry has a long way to go, right, to have adequate representation of people of color in the space. And you all are true trailblazers. I mean, I think when we were starting our careers, there was nothing like this that existed for us. I'd love to hear you guys talk, and let's start with you, Guillermo, a little bit about what the experience has been like for you working as one of the only people of color in the room at the leadership level.
Yeah, and I think it really all started, my passion around this really started when I actually got out of the Navy. And you think about today is there's a lot of respect for those that have served a country. But if you rewind, and I know you guys are freaking out because you're probably saying, this dude's like 25 years old, and, but, I am a little bit older.
Really?
But when I got out of the Navy, I was like one of the only brown dudes that, got out and looked around, and I didn't have a kind of a role model. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the person, but not either on the veteran side or on the Hispanic Latinx side. Mm-hmm. We didn't call them Latinx then, but that's what we were, right? Mm-hmm. I was like a Chicano or a Mexican back then, right? But I didn't have that. So I said to myself, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything possible to be the example of what can be. What can be. Mm-hmm. And so you fast forward, you look at, we launched this in 2001. I launched this organization at Cisco called Conexión, which was the ERG now, we call them. And that grew into something bigger. But one of the key points was that we wanted, we had a vision to be the leaders of Latinos. And I was like, that's not right. We are Latinos. We need to be the leader of people. Mm-hmm. We are leaders in our organizations, and we need to be able to show up as that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, what challenges have you faced being, Latino, Latinx, brown? And it's like, well, if you put your mindset into there are challenges versus, I am a leader at Cisco. I happen to be Latinx, but I'm leading, and fortunately, in the technology space, we're still only 5-6% Latinos, right? And you start to get into the percentage of women in technology the numbers get even worse. But one of the things that I said is, I'm not going to let my color show up as I'm going to be a leader in this organization.
Yeah. I think Sheryl Sandberg had a quote about like, we will have won when we are just leaders.
Yeah,
right?
we're just
that's
leaders.
The conversation. That's
right?
the dialogue.
So what is what is the challenge? The challenge is leadership. It's not whether I'm brown or whether I'm other. It's I need to be a leader in the organization, and I need to show up that way. Oh yeah, I happen to be brown and Latinx, but I'm going to inspire the others to want to do the same.
And I think I read somewhere, though, in terms of navigating your career, and this was when you were in the military as well, relationships, right? In terms of navigating, I think you talked a little bit something about just like overall diversity and how you embrace diversity differently, and the relationship was key to kind of navigating your career.
Well, I learned something from a key mentor of mine, and I call it ROI, relationships over issues. And when you invest in the relationship, it's like investing in a stock. You expect a return. When I invest in the relationship, I get a return. It's just like when I put the time in, I'm going to get something back.
Yep.
And that becomes exponential when you add technology to the mix.
Yep.
So ROI then becomes ROI, right?
Yeah. Larry. Again, behind the music stories, right? Like, what have been the challenges of being the only one? I grew up in public accounting. When I was at Anderson, there were no partners that were women. There were no partners of color. Deloitte was better when I transitioned over to Deloitte, but I know there's still some work to be done.
Deloitte's in the people business, right? That's what we do. But yes, there are many times when I've walked into the room and I am the only one. I still recall as a young, cocky manager, I had a role going across the country, and invariably I would walk into a room and it was full of people who didn't look like me, but it was my job to chart a course. And I actually used to play a little game, you could see skepticism, but I got 60 seconds to get this crowd. Can I do it? Right? And it was out of an interest. What would you do first? Would you tell a joke? Would you do a story? What approach would you use to actually get the crowd on your side? Because getting a crowd on your side is so powerful. So I actually took all of the opportunities that I could, where I was the only person in the room, and tried to use that as an advantage to demonstrate to people that, we know why we're here, we know what we're trying to accomplish, as opposed to being paralyzed by the fact that I'm the only person in the room. But also spent a lot of time thinking about what my role was as the only person in the room. I remember giving another presentation and really thinking about the room in a few different ways. One is the room that I'm the only person in, and what are my responsibilities in that room? Second, what about the room that I own? It's my room, it's my organization, and what are my responsibilities in that room? And then there are the rooms that I don't even get a chance to be in for that particular topic, and do I have any responsibilities there? And in looking at it that way, I quickly began to realize that it is my responsibility to affect all of those rooms, and I have to do so by actually attempting to impact the lives of others. So we have this debate with ourselves. Is it our responsibility to really help ourselves, and in so doing, we'll all get better, or do I have a deliberate responsibility to help other people? And some people come down on different sides of that equation. And I think early on I came to the conclusion that it was my absolute responsibility to deliberately help others get into rooms that I happen to be in, or get into rooms that I own. And that created a whole different set of behaviors that were then necessary in terms of making myself available to people, having conversations with people, and taking on some level of responsibility for their well-being and their development in the organization. I still happen to think that's the right answer. I fly a lot, millions of miles, and I'm still aware of the notion that you've got to put on your mask before helping the person next to you. And I think some of that is still true. You still have to take care of your career. You still have to get ahead. You can't help anybody if you're going down the tubes. But I believe it's our responsibility to deliberately help others to be successful.
I think that's right. Lily, let's transition. I want to talk a little bit more about mentors, sponsors, advocates that have been impactful in your career. I think most of the talent in this room is not as seasoned as this panel. And so how do you secure a sponsor? And when you sponsor an employee, what are you looking for in them?
Sure. I'll share a story. When I used to work at Raytheon, where I started my engineering career, I didn't have the opportunity to even see myself as like the Latina in the room, or the person of color, or the woman. It was actually being able to stand out because I was the youngest person in the room. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm in the room full of engineers who, a lot of them came from a military background, and so they have this tendency to follow certain order, right? And here I am, I'm like, so what are we going to do? Being able to build that credibility was something that was very humbling. Mm-hmm. But I was very fortunate that I was actually paired up with the highest ranking engineer of the entire Raytheon. And at the beginning, people were like, oh, don't talk to him. He's too busy for you. Like, only has very specific questions. So all these people were giving me all their advice. And I just set up some lunchtime, and at the end of the day, we connected as humans. Mm-hmm. I learned about his family, he learned about mine, and he was able to really become that sponsor naturally. Mm-hmm. And what I realized years later is that he provided me a lot of credibility. He brought me into all these technical rooms where people were not paying attention to me, to be honest. And he was like, oh, no, Lily, do you want to answer that? Mm-hmm. And so it was just these little gestures that he provided, so then that way I could actually own and really be able to contribute. Especially, I don't know how many here are software engineers. All right, when your code's not working, it's not working, right? You gotta, there's no way to talk your way out of it. And so I really actually enjoyed being in the problem-solving aspect and getting into the technical weeds of why isn't it working, did the test work, what did we learn? But it was just very impactful to have somebody like him very organically be able to really invest in himself, in my growth, professional growth, technical growth. But what I didn't realize is the signals he was giving others. And so when I got further along in my career, I realized, oh, wow, what are the signals that my other managers might be giving? To your point earlier, when we're not in those rooms, who's championing us? Who's speaking up for us? And I go back to the ERGs, to be honest. Raytheon, that's the opportunity that I had. I was part of the OLA ERG, and I was able to be, yes, one of the youngest people, one of the most junior folks there, but I was able to get in conversations with all the C-suite. And so I got past all that fear, and I was able to build more strategy around. So 2, 3 levels above me, who should I be learning? Who's within my business unit that can help open up more opportunities? And ultimately, what I really learned is I became really passionate about the business and the problems I was trying to solve, and I started following some of the decision-making. And that ultimately led me also to leave this technical space to go into the business side, because I saw that a lot of decisions were not being had in the rooms that I was being at. And so I wanted to learn a higher level. And so I think finding those sponsors, they come in at different pieces. A lot of the times, I remember being in corporate, we had the mentoring programs. You would sign up, and then you're like, oh, I don't quite get along, and I don't know, there's something a little bit off. So it just died off. And then the next time you try, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But look around where you're currently at. There are some people that sometimes may be getting overlooked that could be amazing champions. Sometimes they are your peers. Yeah. But sometimes there are some of these other people who may feel so distant. But at the end of the day, they're just people like you and I. We're all here trying to do something good for the world. We're trying to really improve the opportunities for everybody. And I think being able to connect on that level is important. So then that way that the opportunities are genuine as well. Yep. But make sure that you're also diversify your portfolio, because I think one of the aspects that I learned early on, when I got passed up for my first promotion, that's when I was like, wait a minute, something is off here, because I'm doing the same work. Why am I not getting the same pay? And then that's where I started asking questions. So I actually looked around, who knew my story? who was in those rooms? And I started to realize it was only like this group within my unit, but what about the entire program?
Yeah.
And so little by little, I was very strategic.
Yep.
Started joining lunches and things like that, and I was able to then build a huge network that empowered me.
It's brand, it's relationships. Guillermo, I know you have a personal board of directors concept that
do.
you live by. Could you share? I think that's super powerful.
Yeah, I do, and you know, kind of going back on piggybacking on what she's saying, is a lot of times I think we're afraid to ask. I think just ask. And I think it's also important to understand the difference between the mentor and the sponsor. The mentor is going to talk with you, right? And those people may eventually turn into sponsors, but the sponsor is going to talk about you. So there's actually, this is really important. When you pick a sponsor, this is somebody that's willing to put their badge on the table to say, you know what, G should be promoted.
Yeah.
Or G should get this opportunity. But there's a dual responsibility, because when that person does that, and I've learned this, is I need to deliver.
Yep.
So you need to, it's a dual responsibility. When you want someone to be your sponsor, you better be willing to deliver.
Yep.
And I think this goes to my board of directors. By the way, the chairman of my board is my mom, right?
Always back to the mom,
right?
yes.
But there are key sponsors. These are sponsors that I've had along the way. In fact, one of the sponsors that is on my board is a guy named Lance Perry. And Lance Perry told me, he used to actually be my boss. And he told me, you need to go take this opportunity that they're presenting to you, because you're going to be my boss one day. And I was like, oh, come on, man. You know, there's no way. I'm comfortable here. He's like, dude, you got to go do this. So it was like a kick, right? It was like your sponsor's willing to kick you to go do something that they think that you are capable of. When I went to go do that opportunity, I learned IDKS, that I didn't know.
Fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank. So fast forward, I ended up becoming CIO at Cisco, and Lance was on my direct team. So he was willing, even though he saw that I reported to him, he knew that there was something there.
Yeah.
That's a sponsor.
That's absolutely a sponsor. That's an amazing story. I think as we think about the talent in this room, I'd love to talk a little bit about your organizational leadership for all of you. So when you think about your organizations, your talent, what are the behaviors and traits that you look for in the hiring process? What values are most important to you personally? And I'd love some perspective on culture. What makes a strong organizational culture? And let's go back to Larry.
Well, for me, it's simple. I look for people who walk on water. But, you know, it's all about people, right? Architecture is going to change. I look at different CIOs, and the organizations all look different. But the one thing that never changes is you need really amazing people. So looking for diversity of thought, diversity of age, diversity of ethnic background, all of it, diversity of gender, very intentional about this, because we really do believe the research that shows that diverse teams actually perform better. So this is important for me, important to us. We think about what the pool looks like. Is the pool representative enough? And that resonates a great deal. Looking for people who are intellectually curious about things, people who want to learn, people who are innovative. And sometimes we equate innovation with technology, and we have a very different definition for innovation. It's people who are willing to do one thing better every single day, right? And for us, you know, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to put in that activity? But are you willing to let yourself be known? That's another question that I have. You know, there are times when we get frustrated and we didn't get a promotion or something didn't happen. And the question is, does anybody know you? And you'd say, well, that's a silly question. I mean, of course they know me, but does anybody really know you? Have you opened yourself to anyone? Do people want to be in a foxhole with you, or have you, approached it as, hey, I'm me, that's my private life, what you see is what you get, I did my work, that should speak for itself. And the truth is that very often your work does not speak for itself. You have to speak for yourself. And in order to speak for yourself, you got to speak to somebody. So then back to the question, who knows you? Who really knows you? And I think those questions, when I look at candidates, like, are they willing to be known? Are they willing to step forward? Are they willing to open up? Are they willing to be part of a team? Are they willing to work in a world that we consciously want to be more diverse? Those are some of the things that I think about.
Thank you. Lily, hiring young talent. What are you looking for?
Sure. The Caper Center is a foundation, so focus all in not only increasing the tech representation for folks that look like us, but also folks like us that can start these tech companies. And so our hiring process is different, right? Because we're not a Fortune 500 that keeps growing and we get teams. But at the end of the day, what we're looking for is really looking at the intentionality, the intersectionality, and also growth mindset. But these three factors, going back to when I was at Raytheon or Accenture or at Booz and some of the startups, at the end of the day, all these three are still the same attributes when I look back, as I was reflecting as you were speaking. Because at the end, it's really about who wants to keep learning, who's curious, who's passionate about the problems that you're solving. There is so much stuff happening right now in the world. To be in this room, in this space right now is a blessing, and we are so privileged, right? And so to me, I always just take that into account every single day that I operate. It's like, what's my drive? What's my passion? Mm-hmm. And I think being able to put that into actions and being able to create opportunities for the community through the work that we do are some of those attributes that you need to have that growth mindset. How are you questioning the status quo? How are you thinking of doing things differently? And I always tell myself that, and it took back going back to all these different careers that I've had, because this is probably my fourth career, and I'm in my mid-30s, so I've been moving a lot. But it goes back to like, not just asking why, but it's like, why not? Why can't we be doing things differently? What needs to change? And yes, the problems are meaty and difficult, but we got to start somewhere, right? And so I think that growth mindset of continuously be curious about the problem, be passionate, but also be really proud of yourself and where you're coming. Your distance traveled matters. And I think that to me personally, technology in itself is being held behind because we don't have those distance traveled, being able to make better products, better decisions, more ethical decisions of why we build things, how we put them out into the world, and what are the consequences. And so I think that as in the times that we're in today, this room has a lot more responsibility than we really realize. Mm-hmm. And I think being able to be mindful of that, how we're building the teams, who comes, what are those attributes I think are super critical.
Yeah, intentionality, but growth mindset and intellectual curiosity, I think those are tones that I've heard throughout. Guillermo, let's transition. You're very passionate about STEM education. Can you talk about your passion for working with the next generation of leaders in technology, and how is Cisco working with organizations to do that?
Yeah, so this is, again, I've learned along the way that, you have a purpose. You're here for a reason. You're all in this room for a reason because you have two things. You have a platform, because that's the job that you're doing every day. But you have a purpose. And your purpose it's like a cycle. Your platform, the better you do in your platform, the more you can drive your purpose. When you do your purpose, it inspires your platform, so it's a cycle. My purpose is, I've learned this. I didn't just kind of one day, it just kind of evolved. And it's to build the next generation of diverse leaders, not just talent, but leaders. Because that's what, I learned along the way, and this is what I believe one of the things that I am here to do. So we've been working for several years on this partnership. It's a work-study program, and it's a Cristo Rey. We work with Cristo Rey Academies. This is one example. And I'll tell you the story about Myra, Kaela, Miguel, and Jacob. 5 years ago, because they're now sophomores in university. These were East Side San Jose students that came from the hood, and they got admitted to this organization, this this school called Cristo Rey. And Cristo Rey sponsors this work-study program. So 4 days a week, they go to school. 1 day a week, they work at a company. And so we sponsored them. These kids come in, and they're like, oh, what is this stuff? You know, who are these people? And they see me, they're like, oh, okay, there's somebody who looks like me, right? So I'm like, hey, you know, come on, you know, and I take them into to big meetings, and they're like sitting there going, I don't know what's going on. But they start learning about technology. Mm-hmm. So you fast forward, they graduated last year. Myra went to Cornell University. Kaela went to Santa Clara. Jacob, Humboldt State, and Miguel, San Francisco State.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And these kids, you know, if you saw, if they were in the audience, I'd pull them on the stage, because this room would be like in tears.
Yeah.
I mean, these are kids that, I mean, they didn't have a chance, and now they're like helping others. So my thing to them is, now you build the next. So if those 4 build 4 more, and so on and so forth, we have a room like this.
That's amazing.
Right?
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I wish they were here today.
What's that?
We should have invited them today.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So Larry, so within your technology, you talked a little bit about intentionality and inclusion, and I know within your technology organization, your goal is to include as many women and people of color as you can. Beyond Deloitte, what does this look like for technology teams as we're thinking to the future?
I think there's a bright future. Now, I do think we have to work really, really hard at it, but spending quite a bit of time thinking about how that works. I think you got to start early. So I'm doing some work with charter schools. I sit on the board of KIPP Charter School in Miami, for example, for one simple purpose, and that is I was exposed to a statistic that says children of lower-income families graduate college at a rate of 9% in the United States of America. 9. And I immediately began to think about what happens to the other 91. Mm-hmm. So starting early, how do you get people through school into college? I serve on the board, actually G and I serve on the board of NPower, which teaches technology skills to minorities and veterans. I used to serve on the board of an organization that teaches entrepreneurship skills to minorities and really focused on how do we create opportunities for minorities? How do we create opportunities for women in technology? Also been involved in a number of technology organizations where the goal is to fill the pipeline, where we want to have more women, more people of color in technology, because it's a fantastic field. I mean, think of the things we work on and the way we affect society and the amazing, cool products that we develop. And it is an amazing field for minorities, but only if we start early, and that's part of the goal. So one of my clear purposes in life is to spend time thinking about how to fill that pipeline from as young as it takes all the way through, but fill the pipeline relentlessly so that exposure in society in general can benefit organizations like mine, so that when we look at the candidate pools, we end up fulfilling that intentionality. More women, more minorities in technology is a clear goal.
Yeah. All right, so we're rounding out on time here, so last question for each of you. What is one lesson or piece of advice that's been most valuable to you along your career journey? What can we leave this audience of our future leaders with today? Lily.
If I may, I'll jump into this question, but I wanted to finish this thought of the issue here, because I think I would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about the systemic issues that we have. I think that we, as individual responsible citizens, we need to go back and reinvest in our schools. We need to reinvest in our infrastructure. We need to be public servants in different areas that take us out of our job. No one job is going to be the end and be all. You want to make sure that you are a full citizen in every sense of the word. And so I would definitely want to make sure that we address some of these issues that we have, where yes, we want to increase and get more folks into discovering the journeys and discovering science, But as you go along the path, there are specific systemic issues we got to take, and it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take policy. It's going to take more real talk, but also real action. And so I want to make sure that we do have that, because there's right now, I'm on the board for AI for All, and one of the things that I'm very interested in is how are we leapfrogging some of the opportunities where some of the kids are right now, they're able to learn Python and data science. They're being told to dream bigger. But yet, in some of our other parts of the community, we're still teaching some of our kids technology that's going to get automated and displaced. And if you take a look at by demographics and zip codes and where the families come from, some of these opportunities of being part of the future are not being said or had. And so I actually challenge you all here to be able to take a look at how are we actually pushing the needle across all of it. We got to start. CS for California is a big initiative that K% has been pushing. We have to do that, so then that way we can continue to go through the different paths. But there's also different various of careers that I think we still need to address. And then once we get there, how are we actually using technology for good to actually test our own biases and make sure that we're getting to where we need to go. All that to say, the best advice that I would get is that this isn't just about like your own life journey. We're talking about the generational wealth building opportunity that has been brought to our generation and like no other. If you take a look at where we are today, 6 out of the 9 billionaires have made their money the fastest way through technology. But if we have these gaps and leaky pipelines along the way, how are we as individuals going to even partake in it? And so my advice to myself, former self, and everything that my mom always tells me as well is, why not? This is our time. Stop asking so much, why do I belong here? You do, and you are here. And the question is, why are we moving forward? So that would be the best advice is think bigger, be bolder, and ask why not? Because it is our time, and we need more urgency. We just need more folks to be out there just putting themselves out there, to be honest. And I'm just thankful to have been here, and I've totally taken away the time.
No, go for it. Guillermo. Advice to our future leaders.
So I'm going to move up in my chair here. So I think the advice is this, and it really is sort of similar to what she said. It is someone is going to do that role. Someone is going to drive that platform and that purpose. Why not me? And I said that as and I want to actually thank this panel. I've learned a lot from you. And 14 years ago, I sat on a panel with Larry Quinlan. And all along this way, he's been watching my back. He's been watching my career. And when I became CIO at Cisco, he was right there with me in the room. And I I actually went through a CIO simulation. And Larry flew to visit me, and he sat in that room with me for the first hour of that simulation. And I'll never forget that. So the last piece is, and I'll never forget that, Larry. So always remember where you came from to know where you're going. And that's the advice I would leave.
All right, Larry, quick advice.
Look, this is a people game. Be the kind of person that people want to help. As I look through my career, sometimes, you think you've accomplished a whole lot, but I step back and I look at it. Every single time I reached a pivotal point in my career, and I made the right decision that got me somewhere else, I can point to the person who helped me. And I can sometimes point to the person who helped me when I wasn't smart enough to ask for that help, and they still invested in me and helped me. And I'm not kidding. I can look at every single inflection point, every job I got, every time I turned left or right, and I can actually point to the person who helped make it happen. And it got me to thinking, what kind of person do I have to be that people want to invest in me, that people want to help? It's a big world. They could help the person right next to me. They have limited time. Why me? And I've actually spent some time really thinking about how do I be the kind of person that others want to help, and in return, what do I have to do to ensure that I can help as many people as I can possibly can?
Larry, Lily, Guillermo, thank you. Awesome.